One driver's Miami Grand Prix was over at the first corner, and it may turn out to be that driver's last start in Formula One. Alpine is considering Jack Doohan's future and evaluating a potential change with Franco Colapinto for the very next race at Imola. John, this event, obviously Doohan crashing out after that collision with Liam Lawson at turn 1 here, has continued a very difficult start to the season for him. Before we get into that and the situation he finds himself in, should we just run through exactly what happened on that run to turn 1? Because it was one of those where Doohan didn't really do an awful lot wrong, but he paid a massive, massive price for it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where neither Jack Doohan himself nor Liam Lawson, who he tangled with, he kind of is a difficult, tight first corner. Cars are compressing. But I think looking at the onboard, the getaway wasn't too bad. I think it was kind of jostling for position. Lawson got around the outside. And I think, tiny bit of movement. Maybe Lawson was expecting him to go away. They came into the first corner, Jack over the curbs and just tagged Lawson. You can argue that, was it a 50-50 incident? Was it turn 1? Was it a racing incident? The stewards felt there was anything to investigate. Stewards didn't feel there was a driver deliberately at fault on that front. But I think the problem is it's another first lap exit for Jack Doohan. And at a time when that team's in desperate need of results, I think what we haven't unfortunately seen from Jack is, the complete weekend he's been chasing. We've had flashes of speed, but the results aren't there. And it's another disappointment for Alpine, which is why they've gone away to weigh up what's happening.
Yeah, it will sting Doohan a lot that this came on the weekend. He finally out-qualified Pierre Gasly on merit as well. Gasly wasn't happy with the car. That was shown by the fact that they decided to start him from the pit lane, make the setup changes in Parc Fermé, but take nothing away from Doohan on a difficult weekend for Alpine performance-wise, getting ahead of Gasly and hooking it up more or less in qualifying for the first time, but then just not having that result to show for it on Sunday. You mentioned it's another first lap incident. It's the second time this season he's crashed out on lap 1. And we can get into the details of the season so far and whether he would deserve to be dropped or deserve a stay of execution. As it stands right now, what we understand is that Alpine is seriously evaluating what to do for Imola, and this is obviously going to be, if they make the change, the culmination of a story that began back in January when Alpine signed Colapinto as test and reserve driver, and it revives it having only a couple of races ago seemingly gone in Doohan's favour because it looked like Doohan was going to be safe until the summer break.
Yeah, I think he had wouldn't say a strong start to the season, but I think he's shown enough speed and promise during various sessions. Australia was quite good pace. I think you could argue his lap 1 exit there was just, misfortune, unlucky, it can happen. Isaac Hadjar, who we all know is a very impressive rookie, was out before the start in Australia, so I don't think you can have it there. But I think the problem is that other incidents have come on in China. In the Sprint and Grand Prix, there were the penalties. Obviously, Japan was the DRS incident. There was track limits, again, in Bahrain, penalty, and the first one exit here. I think if he was the only rookie on the grid, you could argue it just takes time to get there. But the problem is this is a weekend where Kimi Antonelli's been on pole position in the sprint, be fighting up there. We know Hadjar's been super quick. We see how strong Behrman is. So being a rookie nowadays isn't, I think, an excuse anymore to need time. You don't need it. And I think in the back of Alpine's mind also is that last year Franco Colapinto came in and was quick almost straight away as well. So I think at some point, you can talk about all that a driver, has the promise and potential and these flashes of weekends. They've got to piece it together. And I think if a driver can't do that, then this is why a team starts thinking maybe that's not going to happen.
Yeah, and the worry is that Doohan hasn't used the big weapon that he had to full effect, which is the incumbency. The fact that he is in the seat right now. If he'd done a fantastic job the first 6 races of the year, it wouldn't matter that it's only the first 6 races because Alpine would be convinced. And a lot of this would have stopped. We know that there's been some division, let's say, within the team and the decision makers, but also even in the engineering department, they think is the right decision, which is obviously consistency. You want to carry on with the driver that you've done the pre-season testing with and all this development work with. There's been a desire from Flavio Briatore, and I think Luca Di Maio is also an admirer of Colapinto. They wouldn't have brought him into the fold if they didn't seriously think he was an option for the race team. But those on the race team side are thinking, well, we've started with Doohan, we see flashes there. And actually, we talk about Doohan's performance and pace. He actually impressed Alpine with how quick he looked at the start of the year. I think they were surprised by that. So Colapinto coming back into the picture almost, having maybe that 2-race stay of execution almost. It means that Colapinto is a serious option, but it also says that Doohan hasn't been convincing enough and hasn't just taken advantage of the fact that he's in the car. He could have staked his claim. But in terms of Colapinto specifically, how much do we think this is Alpine deciding that it's worth the gamble, even if because there's obviously lots of speculation about how much money he will bring, could theoretically bring. We saw how much he brought into Williams, for example. We've seen at least one Latin American company come on board at Alpine since Colapinto arrived, but it's a performance game. And if Doohan's performing like this, is the argument as simple as, well, Colapinto won't do much worse?
I think you're correct. It's a results game, and unfortunately, Jack's not had the results that definitely are needed. He had the chance. He had that statement from Flavio Briatore that he was safe to summer, which he was at that point. But circumstances have changed. The results haven't come. Another Turn 1 exit at a time when Alpine need points as much as possible. We see how strong Williams is now. Lots of potential there. Kind of needs to be unlocked from this car, and they need to push forward. They can't afford to have first lap exits. And I think from Colapinto's perspective, I don't think there was a push from pre-season to say we're definitely going to conspire and get Franco in for this race. But the long game was clearly there. You don't sign a driver from a rival team and bring him in on a long-term contract if you don't believe that he is going to be there. I think we've probably done videos and podcasts this season predicting that Colapinto will be in that car next year. So I think it's a question of when, not if. It may well still be a question of when, not if. And it could be that Alpine's decision is to maybe extend and see what happens. But I think as we saw with the Liam Lawson situation in China this year, I mean, that changed on a Sunday. On the Saturday night, it seemed he was safe for Japan and the team was ready to give him time. But decisions were made on the Sunday. The race wasn't there. The results weren't there. And time has to come for a change. And I think also maybe another factor working against Jack in this circumstance is we're coming to a triple header. You aren't going to swap a driver in for Monaco. You've got big changes for Barcelona. So you start that triple header with a driver, you finish it, and maybe this will factor into that call when they come to make it.
And I should say, when it comes to Colapinto, saying that Alpine might consider it to be, well, it won't be a downgrade because of where Doohan's performing, that's not a slight on Colapinto to say that he's not a good driver. I was really impressed with how he came in at Williams last year, handled the circumstances with his inexperience, showed great maturity and pace and a bit of swashbuckling bravado at times with some of the moves that he made, and scored points and is really effective. He did have a wobble. He had some crashes. He had some weekends that weren't as impressive pace-wise, but he's a rookie. He's inexperienced, so there's a good driver there. In the Doohan context, it is purely that Colapinto's best chance, arguably, was Doohan underachieving, and that is what has been the case so far. As you pointed out, it may still end up being that Doohan stays in the car for Imola and maybe makes it to the summer, maybe makes it to the end of the season. I think the percentage chances of that are lower than they've been even since the start of the year. I think the consideration will come in the next few days. Hopefully not in the next few hours. So by the time we finish recording this, it's all moot. If they do go ahead and make the change, which, let's be honest, we haven't spoken to team boss Ollie Oakes this evening. He didn't do a media session. He did say in the middle of the Miami weekend that as of today, and that day was Friday, Jack's their driver. So it was a bit of equivocation.
Well, but there was a quote from him on that day, says we are always evaluating, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So there was equivocation even in the middle of the weekend, and I think his situation's got worse now. So if the change does get made, we've talked about Colapinto, and it will be a great opportunity for him. Do you think it will be harsh on Doohan? 6 races isn't a massive sample set, but as you said, other rookies are impressing within 6 races, aren't they?
I think ultimately, if you're going to make it as a Formula One driver, you need to seize the opportunities when they are there. The day you've got quick cars, you need to piece weekends together. I think the rookie excuse doesn't exist anymore. I think sim preparations and the work, engineering work and data means you've got to nail it. And I think some drivers can come in. Look at Ollie Behrman, Saudi Arabia last year. Every opportunity for that to go wrong, he nailed it. You look at what Hadjar's done this year. You look at Kimi Antonelli. I think he's had a fair crack at the whip. It's not happened. Not all those circumstances are because of him, but this is Formula One, unfortunately. It's a brutal business. You need to perform every single day. And if you don't perform, your team starts thinking of other options.